Okay, great day everyone. I'm Alicito de Guzman, the community lead of PWA Pilipinas. Joining me tonight is Michael Lance. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Andre. Good afternoon to all of you. Ayan.
Yes. Okay, so before we begin, PWA Pilipinas Cloud.talks AWS Edition is made possible in partnership with education.ph and Amazon Web Services. So before we introduce yung ating speaker for tonight, let's first introduce our organization, PWA Pilipinas. Okay, so PWA Pilipinas is the community organization for progressive web apps enthusiasts, designers, and developers here in the Philippines. Our mission is to introduce and nurture PWA development and adoption in the Philippines and beyond by fostering a community for subject matter experts, enthusiasts, adopters, and developers of the platform, and by providing resources and engagement just like this to stimulate interest in progressive web apps. Because our vision is that progressive web apps would be adopted widely here in the Philippines. Okay, so if you want to stay in touch with us, we have our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn accounts. And we also have our email, hi@pwapilipinas.org if you want to send us an email. And of course, we do have our PWA Pilipinas app, which is available via app.pwapilipinas.org, or on Google Play, just search for PWA Pilipinas. Okay, and okay, we're going to promote first the PH Tech Week 2021. So PH Tech or the Philippine Tech Week 2021 is the first of its kind conference here in the country that showcases different like-minded and community-focused organizations today. So with this year's theme of building skills, better careers with tech communities, member organizations of the Philippine tech community put the spotlight on honing the skills, not just of its members, but also of each and every Filipino during these trying times. So the featured session include keynotes, talks, and workshops co-organized by different member communities, representing technologies from all corners of the industry. So make sure to sign up now to reserve your free slot. Just visit techweek.phtechcommunity.org. And as a note, PWA Pilipinas is a part of the big Philippine tech community, along with other tech communities in the Philippines like AWS User Group Philippines, DevCon, and a whole lot more. Okay. So, how was it? Have you signed up, Michael? Not yet.
Yeah. So we have a good conversation now, no? We have a good topic, no? Kaya if I were you, tutok lang, guys. Tutok lang. Okay.
So, this is a really great topic tonight, yung share ng speaker natin. So make sure to share this to your friends and colleagues. They're going to learn a lot about AWS because AWS is a really great cloud provider. So yeah. So before we proceed, if you do have questions, you may leave them at the comment section. We're going to answer them later. So if you have questions about AWS Amplify, etc., or you have some shout outs, just leave them there. We're going to read them as we go along the program.
Maganda yung topic natin din, no?
Oo. So, yan, no? So, are you looking for a way to build cloud-native web and mobile apps? So, AWS Amplify eliminates the undifferentiated heavy lifting of a traditional 3-tier web application with an easy-to-use library, a powerful tool chain, and built-in capabilities such as authentication and analytics. Wow, grabe ang powerful nun, ha? And uncover how to bring your ideas to life and scale it to the max and delight your users in less time than before. Isipin mo, wala ka na masyadong isipin. Yung AWS na yung gagawa. So, our speaker for tonight is Alvin Delagon. He is a partner solutions architect for Amazon Web Services. He focuses on supporting and enabling our local companies to be successful on a myriad of AWS-related projects. Prior to joining AWS, he was a senior manager for platforms engineering team who built Paymaya. So if you're using Paymaya, and he's been an AWS practitioner since 2009. Wow. So without further ado, let's welcome on cloud.talks, Sir Alvin. Hi, welcome.
Hello,
Welcome, sir.
Andresito. Thank you, Michael. So I guess looking at the comments, no, I think we could probably deliver it in a more
Mm-mm.
intimate manner. So I just talk in the Taglish na lang, no? Okay.
Yes.
So so yeah, so
Okay lang.
thank you very much for inviting us here. And actually, you might also ask why is AWS in PWA Pilipinas top, right? So, kasi
Yes.
most of the time, you might think that AWS is basically just an infrastructure as a service. So, if you need servers in the cloud, that's pretty much AWS. But uh, actually, over the years, we've been really building a lot of services catered for the developer community. Okay, and actually, one of the exciting services that we'll be going to talk today is Amplify. So, and actually, since you mentioned, diba, undifferentiated heavy lifting, this is something that even a front end developer like most of the members in PWA might not have any deep knowledge in AWS, but you can actually deploy web applications without much deep knowledge in AWS. So that's what Amplify brings to the table. Okay, so without further ado, so I just share my screen. Let me see kung nagana to, ha? Window screen 1 ba? Screen 2. Ayan, screen 1. All right. Okay. Can you guys, all right, all good. I can see it myself. Okay. So, yeah, so first, let me introduce myself. So, just like what Abisita mentioned, so I'm Alvin, and I'm a solutions architect for Amazon Web Services. I'm based in Manila. So, previously, di ba, in AWS kasi walang office sa Pilipinas, but I have to say, Philippines is actually one of the biggest and most active AWS customers in Asia. And I have to say, not just for not just on the developer community, but even our government like BSP, they're actually quite pretty much open to the idea of moving workloads to the cloud. Okay, so I've been with AWS for 2 years now, and I started my career primarily as a backend developer. So just kind of high level warning. I'm not a front end developer. I don't do front end stuff on a day to day basis, but I can do front end if needed. But I started as primarily as a backend developer, and midway through my developer stint, I worked on developing user-facing apps using MVC frameworks back when it was the norm, no uso pa yun, di ba? So we have, kadalasan ginagamit ko dati nung time na yun, Django eh. And then I recently dived into client-side development using JavaScript and React. So prior to joining AWS, so I led the team that developed one of the successful fintech services here in the Philippines called Paymaya. And if you're using Paymaya, thank you very much for supporting that. That's actually 100% Filipino-built app. So if seeing people using it pretty much makes me really proud. Okay, so without further ado, so let's start to discover what AWS Amplify and what is the value proposition for the front-end developers. All right, so in this session, we will discuss kung ano yung mga common demands of a modern web application, and then we'll run through AWS Amplify and AppSync and how it interlaces with React. Okay, so the demos later will primarily use React.js, but as soon as I continuously work to my deck, you'll also discover that you can actually use different JavaScript frameworks along with Amplify. Okay. And then lastly, I will take you on a tour to a typical Amplify workflow through a short demo. Then after this, we'll have a Q&A. So just like you mentioned, if you have any questions, so just type into the comment section, then we'll check it out later. Kung gusto niyo ng kopya ng deck na to, so you can just click this link. So bit.ly/pwa.ph to download this deck. All right, so when we say about modern app, so modern app is basically kung ano yung mga expectations sa mga tao on the present day, di ba? So nowadays, if you're going to make an app, di ba, expected sa atin na dapat ang app mo should be accessible and available across multiple platforms. Dati, On the early 2000s, we only have to deal with web applications. But now, kung may web app ka, dapat meron ka na rin mobile app. Modern apps also have to be responsive and should be able to have the ability to work offline. So responsiveness just pretty much falls under progressive web apps, diba? So meaning being able to adjust the UI depending on the channel. And then actually expected din sa'yo to be able to create some sort of authentication and authorization mechanism. So uso na rin ngayon yung mga social media logins, diba? Such as Facebook Connect and Google's OpenID. Real-time feedback is also required, especially if you need to build apps that has location tracking. So kung gagawa ka ng mga, for example, some kind of a Waze app, dapat real-time. Or maybe you're trying to build your own stock price ticker. So back then, users are forced to refresh, but now they don't need to do that. And also all of that is to be able to have a capability to deliver new features quickly with little to no downtime. So ngayon, actually, kung makakita ka ng isang service or app na nag-a-announce na, okay, will be down for a specific amount of hours just to do some maintenance, that's actually kind of a negative kind of a sentiment nowadays. Okay? So my point of emphasis here is that yung customers expect us to be able to iterate fast while being cost efficient and ensuring that our products can scale to meet demand. So that's why nowadays, actually, it didn't happen a decade later that people are starting building stuff on the cloud because of this thing called scalability, right? And also to reduce yung amount of maintenance work that you have to do, especially if you're running it on premises. Developers will be focusing on building the best application and create value for our customers. So actually, the main benefit of moving to the cloud is not just the cost efficiency. The main benefit for moving to the cloud is actually to really focus on your product instead of worrying about operations. So that's why companies nowadays, especially startups, they try to offload most of the maintenance and the infrastructure work to the cloud providers. So now this is actually where AWS Amplify comes in. Okay, so AWS Amplify is not just a way for you to host websites. It's actually more than that. So I'm really excited to really talk about this to everyone. Okay, so AWS Amplify comes with the three main components. So first is a framework. So this actually includes set of libraries and UI components. So kunyari, if you're using React.js as your front-end framework, meron na mga React.js front UI components na provide na rin ni Amplify. So let's say, for example, if you want to create a login page, diba? So pwede rin gamitin mo na lang yung UI component na binigay na Amplify. And it's actually already integrated to the backend. So you don't need to stitch the backend anymore. Another component is a command line tool. So that actually provisions the necessary AWS services needed and glues it together with your app. And then lastly, a set of developer tools that you can use for building, testing, and deploying your entire app. So let's go over the Amplify components in detail. Okay. So first of all, Amplify framework is open source. You can do a quick Google search. You can see it in GitHub. And it's actually one of the fastest growing and actively maintained frameworks on GitHub. And in order for it to be able to abstract a lot of heavy lifting for you, your Amplify framework is actually designed to be opinionated. Okay? So you might hear about ano ba yung framework mo? Opinionated ba yan? Or a framework that I can bend to my own will. Okay? Now, Amplify goes to the opinionated side kasi first of all, is for it to be able to automate a lot of stuff for you sa backend, it has to follow a certain set of rules and a certain set of way of deploying backend stuff. Okay, so it comes with the pros and cons depending on your use case. So let's say, for example, if you plan to rapidly bring an idea to life, kunyari, may bubuin ka lang MVP or most viable product, definitely mga opinionated frameworks can definitely save you a lot of time. Kasi ina-abstract niya tsaka ina-automate niya yung maraming bagay behind the scenes. But if you plan to have full control of your framework behavior and at the same time have a full understand, and at the same time, meron kayong dedicated the backend team that knows how to build and stitch your backend components, then definitely I think Amplify might not be the best tool for you. But this one, this one still has its own place, and we even have customers who actually use Amplify framework on production. Now, if you're talking about Amplify framework, so you might, if you do a quick Google search, so yung AWS services, we have around 200 plus AWS services. So napakarami, di ba? So just imagine you have 200 different kinds of Lego bricks that you have to choose and choose and build your website with, right? Now, the problem with that is that you have to have maybe a working knowledge or in-depth knowledge with AWS to be able to do that. Now, we actually were quite well aware that we also have to address the developers as well. Because gusto namin i-empower yung mga developers to be able to provision infrastructure and backend without dependency to the operations people. Now, if you're going to build a website using Amplify framework, you don't need to know about ano bang gagamitin kong database, ano bang gagamitin kong hosting, ano bang gagamitin kong authentication mechanism. Hindi na. All you have to do is just you have to specify yung capabilities that you need. Okay? So, as you can see, let's say for example, if I'm building a website that needs to have users to be able to authenticate before they can access the backend, all you have to do is just enable the auth capability. And if once you enable the auth capability, bahala na si Amplify to provision the necessary backend to be able to have your authentication system. Okay? And more of that. So let's say, for example, if you want to have a website to collect analytics, you want to collect clickstream events, di ba? Uso na kasi ngayon yun eh. So you want to see your user behavior from the front end side pa lang. Even yung mouse hover, di ba? So gusto mo i-publish agad sa backend yun to see whether itong tao na to is we've been thinking about adding this to cart or not. All you have to do is just enable analytics capability, then automatic, meron ng analytics backend na rin i-provision. You can also do some exciting stuff here. Let's say, for example, if you want to build websites that has augmented or virtual reality content within your applications, you can enable the XR capability. So, doon yung makikita na, let's say, for example, you can create a website wherein there's a person that's actually talking to you. Hindi na siya simpleng chatbot lang na text, di ba? So, you can create websites wherein there's actually a real virtual person answering your customer's inquiry. So, if you want something like that, then all you have to do is just enable XR. Okay? So, you don't need to really dabble that much deep on AWS services. So, that's the main benefit of Amplify. So, let's go over each of the components one by one before we go to the demo. Kasi I want to make sure that everyone understands these components before they see the demo. Okay? So, the first component, as I mentioned, is a client library. Okay? So, the client library is basically allows you to be able to connect and interact with the cloud services from your app. Okay? So, pag was in-include mo yung Amplify library do sa front end mo, that brings together yung how your front end will authenticate to AWS and kung paano siya makikipag-communicate sa mga back-end components. Okay? So, kasama na yun sa client libraries. Client libraries are available on iOS, Android, and web. So, let's say, for example, if you're building a web app for your MVP, then eventually planning to create a mobile app, front end for your service, pwede mo nang gamitin din si Amplify on iOS and Android. And that comes along with set of libraries that you can use that's specific to the mobile app. So let's say, for example, yung mga push notifications, diba? So, ano na rin yun, kasama na yun sa library. Then, for the demo later, we'll be using React. But as you can see, we also support popular JS frameworks, so React Native. So if you want to create a mobile app using React, it will also support Angular, Vue, and Ionic. Okay? All right. Then the second component naman is yung command line interface. So yung command line interface is actually that through the use of CLI, you can create, provision, and deploy all the necessary resources that you need for your application. Okay, so the Amplify CLI can be downloaded and installed either on Mac, Windows, or Linux. So meron dong link sa baba for you to be able to see the installation guide link. So very madali lang siyang i-set up. For the demo later, makikita nyo, gagamitin ko yung CLI. Okay? So this is actually the typical way of using the CLI. So yung mga most common commands that you'll be using are the ones that needed for configuring the backend. So let's say, for example, if you want to initialize your Amplify project, so all you have to do is just go to the current directory and type Amplify init. So let's say, for example, if you want to add a certain capability to your web app, so all you have to do is just type in Amplify add and the name of the category. So in this case, let's say, for example, if you want to add hosting, meaning you want to host your web application either through Amplify or S3, all you have to do is just type in Amplify add hosting. All right. Then Amplify push is executes and deploys all of the changes into AWS. Okay. So let's say, for example, kung meron kang in-add na bagong capability or you made a little bit of changes on the configuration, so all you have to do is just type in Amplify push. Tapos bahala na si Amplify CLI to make the changes on AWS automatically. And then lastly, Amplify publish. So Amplify publish does pretty much the same as Amplify push, pero ang publish pretty much does the additional steps of building your assets. So yung mga static assets, di ba, usually minimize, tapos yung mga images kino-compact. Okay? So pag once ready ka nang i-publish yung web app mo, so all you have to do is just type in Amplify publish. Pwede nyo rin gamitin yung Amplify CLI to provision to using multiple environments. So if ever you plan to build and deploy across different environments, so let's say, for example, dev, test, staging, or prod, Amplify gives you the capability to do so. Okay, so in this case, separate yung mga environments. It also makes it also easy to switch between environments, and you also have the capability to share or isolate the backend components across team members. So let's talk about yung last component of Amplify, so which is pretty much deals with the development lifecycle. So besides Amplify CLI, we also have an Amplify console. So Amplify console is actually a web console that you can use to manage and monitor your deployments. And actually, pre-configured na rin yung CI/CD rin niya. So let's say, for example, kung wala ka pang CI/CD pipeline, yung mga popular pipelines yan, like ba yung mga GitLab CI or Jenkins or even our AWS offerings such as Code Pipeline, si AWS Amplify makes it easier for you kasi meron na siyang pre-configured na pipeline. So in this case, you can actually attach your Git repository. So and then you can configure Amplify to listen to your Git server. So every time na meron mag-Git push, pwedeng automatically i-build the Amplify and then deploy that automatically for you. But if ever, pwede naman din manual. So tulad na pinakita ko kanina, di ba? So you can deploy your Amplify apps using Amplify CLI, and then you can open the Amplify console to see yung status. And also, if you're curious about what's happening on the AWS side, so unified yung dashboard niya. So meaning, let's say, for example, kung meron kayong mga certain capabilities that you added, di ba? So kung nag-add kayo ng authentication or kung nag-add kayo ng analytics, you can just go to the Amplify console and take a look at each of the components that was provisioned. Okay? And then let's talk a little bit about data layer. Kasi front end is not just one thing. We have to store data. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that everyone would agree that our customers right now would like to have low latency messaging, diba? So uso na ngayon yung single page app. Hindi na uso ngayon yung pag-refresh mo yung mga users mo, di ba? So this is actually very expected to a modern app. So say for example, if you want to build your stock ticker, dapat real time yung current value. And also, customers nowadays expect that dapat yung yung apps mo should still be able to function even though na walang internet or if it's offline. So some applications nowadays even work. So let's say for example, if you're building a banking app, you should at least give your users a capability to be able to see their transaction logs, diba? So even though na walang internet, kasi why not allow them to do so? But give them a warning na, okay, I cannot get the real-time value, but here's your transaction log that I have right now. So ganun yung mga modern apps nowadays. So you have to build applications to have some kind of an offline storage. Now, usually, kung front-end developers, diba? So whenever we communicate to the back-end, so possibly or definitely ang pinaka-popular way of communicating to the back-end is through REST, diba? So I'm pretty sure everyone built applications using communicating to REST, diba? So this is actually the most popular API design pattern, but there's actually a recent invention called GraphQL. Okay, so GraphQL was introduced by Facebook back in 2015. Yung main benefit ng GraphQL is actually GraphQL gives you the ability to consolidate different resources into one endpoint, which pretty much minimizes network latency. So, explain ko lang muna in a more visual manner, okay? So, let's say, for example, if you're going to build, let's say, for example, a blogging application, diba? So, if you're building a single-page app, or maybe just a simple web page lang, diba? Kung mag-build tayo ng isang blog entry, we should be able to get all of the posts, diba? So, definitely on a REST context, you hit yung endpoint, which is /post. Tapos on the same page, you also want to see the comments. So you also hit the /comments endpoint. And also, if you want to see yung author na post, you also have to hit a different endpoint. Okay? So actually, there's nothing wrong with that. Pero as you can see, your mobile apps your web app or your mobile apps are forced to make 3 separate HTTP calls. And the problem with separate HTTP calls is chatty siya, meaning maraming bounce back, maraming ping pong, di ba? So, sorry, that actually increases yung latency, or meaning tumatagal yung pag-load ng web page nyo. Now, usually yung ginagawa before is that para ma-minimize yung chattiness, usually you talk to your backend guys to create this thing called compound API, parang isang API endpoint na bahala na mag-consolidate ng mga API, itong separate API calls na to into one call. Pwede naman din yun, pero the problem with that setup is that you will introduce another moving part, diba? So yung backend team mo have to create another API endpoint pa. Now, this is actually where GraphQL comes in. So with GraphQL, all you have to do is just talk to your GraphQL endpoint. And then on the GraphQL side, GraphQL can be, the GraphQL server can communicate to the 3 different data sources, either pwedeng parallel or pwedeng one by one. And then pag once na-collecta na lahat yung mga information, then get back to the front end. Okay? That's actually the added benefit of GraphQL API, because it actually reduces the chattiness and thus improves your web page loads faster. So if you plan to use GraphQL to communicate to your backend, you can actually use any open source GraphQL servers. But kung ayaw mong mag-maintain ng GraphQL server for you, you can actually let AWS manage that for you. So we have this thing called service called AWS AppSync, which actually integrates well with Amplify. Okay, so it does the heavy lifting of securely connecting to your data sources. So it can connect to different data sources such as NoSQL databases like DynamoDB, or maybe or even traditional databases such as MySQL. AppSync can also integrate to external HTTP data sources. So kunyari, you can also consolidate data that comes in from other REST APIs. So pwede rin yung kay AppSync. It also supports subscriptions. So say for example, if you want to build apps that need real-time updates from the backend, AppSync can also do so by delivering it through WebSockets. Okay. And then lastly, along with the framework, yun. So, wait lang. Parang, ayun. So actually, along with AppSync, kung ginagamit nyo rin siya with Amplify, it actually has a way to be able to automatically sync back to the backend. So, especially kung walang internet. So, it's actually a very nifty feature, especially if you want to build applications that are more resilient to spotty network connections. Okay? So, that actually address yung challenge, diba? So, by reducing the latency, by compounding all of the API calls into one through GraphQL and AppSync, and we also reduce the we also improve the user experience by giving the user an ability to still interact to your app even though there's no internet. So if ever you're planning to use GraphQL to interact with the backend, so you actually just need to define the schema of the API. So meron siyang syntax. So ang syntax is actually called Schema Definition Language or SDL. Very similar din siya sa ORM. So if you're a backend developer like me, whenever we also build models from our databases, we build ORM models. So pagdating naman sa APIs, you can actually create a schema like this. So as you can see here, it pretty much defines that we're building a GraphQL endpoint called post. Tapos meron siya mga fields na title and then author. Then nakalagay din dito kung anong data type. Tapos kung ano yung model. Okay? As you can see, there's also some exclamation point here that pretty much signifies that this field should be required. Okay? So we will explore this further in detail in the next few slides and demo later. But I also failed to mention, pag once naintindihan nyo na how to create SDLs, you can actually automatically create APIs based on the SDLs by just typing Amplify code gen. So actually, pag once na nakapag-create ka na ng SDL and you want to create models for your front end to be able to communicate to your backend through GraphQL, you don't need to write that by hand anymore. So all you have to do is just type in Amplify code gen. So papakita niyo mamaya sa demo. Okay? And then, for the sake of understanding the demo later, so I'll be discussing a little bit about a database service called Amazon DynamoDB. Okay? So I will not dive deep much in here. So kasi this is a backend component, but if ever you need to have some kind of a NoSQL database that you won't have to manage anymore and let AWS manage, you can actually make use of Amazon DynamoDB. So Amazon DynamoDB is a key value document database, and it actually can deliver single-digit millisecond performance at any scale. It's fully managed. You can actually configure it to be multi-region, meaning you can create DynamoDB that are actually available in different regions, maybe both in Singapore and Japan, if ever you have different sets of geolocation customers. Okay, so for the demo later, we will create a web app that will make use of DynamoDB as our storage. All right, so we'll be building an app for today using Amplify, and then we'll use the front end framework React.js. So simple lang yung gagawin natin, di ba? So whenever we try to learn something new, especially on the front end, kadalasan yung parang mala hello world natin is basically a to-do app. Okay? So, the demo today, we will be creating a React-based to-do web application powered by Amplify. We will be using 3 basic capabilities. One would be yung auth. Mag-a-add tayo ng auth. Sorry. Auth will pretty much automatically provision Amazon Cognito So Amazon Cognito is basically an AWS service that manages your user database, and at the same time provides you a way to manage your users. So you don't need to create your own backend that will handle yung reset password, or if you want to make some changes on how your password policy, so pwede mo nang gawin yun sa Cognito. So pag once nag-add ka ng authentication capability sa Amplify, automatic may Cognito ka sa backend. Okay? And then we will create an API that will be a GraphQL based Amplify that will be powered by AWS AppSync. Tapos yung data source ng AppSync will be DynamoDB. And then lastly, pag once na okay na tayo, we will actually deploy our to-do app through Amplify hosting. Okay? So as you can see, we actually create a fully functional web application without any EC2 servers or any server, because this is actually completely serverless. Okay. So for the sake of demo today, so yung demo is actually pre-recorded previously. Kasi if I do a live demo today, medyo matagal to, di ba? Ano ka lang mag-npm install ka lang, it will take a few minutes. So ang gagawin natin, I'll be uploading a video. So let me do that now. But if you have any questions, so feel free just to check into the post it to the comments. I'll check it later. I'll check it later and answer them. So let me share the video. All right, so Andresito, Michael, can you play it for me? So before we begin, please make sure that you have an AWS account. So in my case, sorry, medyo nawala yata.
Okay.
Log in on my own personal AWS account as an administrator. The next step would be to install Amplify CLI. So, and before installing Amplify CLI, you need to have at least Node.js 10 or higher installed and npm version 5. So to be able to install Amplify CLI on your local laptop, so you can use npm for that. So in this case, we will do an npm install -g amplify/CLI. All right, so while my Amplify CLI is being installed, so I'll pause the video ahead until it finishes. All right, so I finally got the AWS Amplify CLI installed. So the next step would be to configure it. So in order to configure it, so all you have to do is just type in Amplify configure. You have to make sure that you're currently logged in on your AWS console while doing this. Okay, so it will open your AWS console. So I'm currently logged in. So all I have to do is just head back to the terminal and press enter to continue. So it will ask you on what AWS region do you want your Amplify project to be deployed. So in this case, I'll just use US East 1, which is North Virginia. And then Amplify configure will automatically create an IAM user. Okay, so an IAM user is basically required by Amplify for it to be able to communicate to AWS APIs, for it to be able to provision the necessary backend components for you. Okay, so I'll just use the default auto-generated username, amplify-til. Okay, then it's going to open your web browser again, and as you can see, it's trying to create an IAM user with this name. And all you have to do is just click next and make sure that you provide this IAM user an access to administrator access. Okay, so you can just, for simplicity's sake for this demo, so I just use administrator access. but for production, you can create specific policies that is actually only needed by Amplify. Okay. So let's click add tags. We don't need that for now. Just click review and then create user. Okay, so once the IAM user for Amplify CLI has been created, so we will be shown by this screen, wherein you'll be given the access key ID and the secret access key. So please make sure that you don't share this to somebody else. It should be very confidential. So in this case, I will just have to copy the access key ID, head back to my console. Just press enter to continue and just provide the CLI, the access key ID. Then you'll be asked for the secret access key. So let me just hide my screen for now because I don't want anyone to see my secret access key. And just paste it here and then press enter. So the next Amplify configure will ask for a profile name. So a profile name is basically a name that will contain the access key ID and the secret access key that will be used whenever you issue commands to Amplify. So in this case, I'll just provide a memorable profile name. So Amplify demo. And then we have successfully set up the new user. So in this case now, we currently have configured an IAM user, and this IAM user will be the one that AWS CLI will use to be able to communicate to AWS through its APIs. Okay. So that's that for setting up the AWS CLI. So the next step would be for us to bootstrap our React app project. So typically we use npx for that. So let's start off by going to our terminal, typing npx create React app. I just name my React app as my-to-do-list. And let's just let npx create app bootstrap the React application for us. All right, so we finally have our React application bootstrap. So if everything has been created correctly, so if we go inside our root project folder and do an npm start, it should start up the development server. Okay, so let's see. Just loading for quite a bit. Okay, so we finally have the React application. Okay, so the logical next step is to initialize Amplify on this project. Okay, so I'll just stop my development server for now, and then while inside my to-do list project root folder, I just have to type in Amplify init to initialize our project with Amplify. So typing in Amplify init will ask a few set of questions. So we'll run through them one by one. Okay, so first is to provide the name of the project. So I'll just use the default one, which is my to-do list. Let's enter the name of the environment. So let's make it dev. So just keep it at default. And then it will ask you to choose your default editor. So since I'm using Visual Studio Code, so I just select Visual Studio Code. And then it will ask you what type of app are you building. So are you building using Android, Flutter, or iOS? In our case, we're building a web app, so I'll just be using JavaScript. And then what JavaScript framework are we using? So we'll be using React. Press enter. So it will also ask you the source directory path. So since we created our React application using create React app, so we can just choose the defaults here. So For the source directory path, it should be src. The build folder for distribution directory path. There's the build command and the start command. So let's just keep everything at default. All right, and then it will ask you what authentication method do you want to use. Since we created an AWS profile to store our access key and secret access key, so we just choose AWS profile and choose the one that we created in the past few steps. So in this case, I have created the profile called Amplify Demo. Okay, so Amplify init will start provisioning some of the components on AWS. So this might take a while, and I'll just pause the video and then turn it on once everything's done. All right, so we finally finished initializing our Amplify project. So when you initialize a new Amplify project, some few things happen. So if you look inside the contents of our project root folder, so let me clear my screen and list, you should be able to see that there's a new top level folder named Amplify. So this folder stores your backend definition. So during the tutorial, we'll be adding capabilities such as GraphQL API and authentication. So as you add features, the Amplify folder will grow and will contain the infrastructure as a code templates that will define your backend stack. Also, if we go under the source folder, so cd src, you'll see a new file called AWS exports.js. So let's open that for a bit. Okay, so AWS exports.js basically contains the configuration for Amplify. So in this case, since we chose US East 1 or the North Virginia region for our Amplify project to be deployed. Okay. Another change that Amplify init does for you is that it also updates your git ignore. So let's check that out. Okay. So as you can see here, so there's some new entries on your git ignore because these files and folders, you wouldn't want them to be included on your git repository. Okay. So that's pretty much some of the changes here. So the next step is actually to install the Amplify UI React libraries. Okay. So in order for us to install it, so let's just maximize my terminal, clear my screen, and we install the necessary UI React libraries using npm. So npm install aws-amplify /UI React. All right, so again, this will take a little bit, it's going to take a lot of time. So I'll just pause the video, then resume it once everything's done. Okay, so we finally have managed to install the necessary UI React libraries for Amplify. So the next step is to include it to your React application. So in order to do so, we will be adding some few lines of codes on our index.js. So let's open that file. Okay, and then right after the last import line on your index.js, so we'll be adding these 3 lines of code. So these 3 lines of code pretty much includes the AWS Amplify library to your React application and the configuration file, so which is this one. Okay, and then we will initialize Amplify with Amplify configure AWS exports. Right, then just save that. And the next step would be is to add a new capability to our React Amplify application. So the first capability that we'll be adding is the API endpoint that is powered by AppSync, and then a data storage layer that will be powered by DynamoDB. Okay, so in order for us to do that, so let's just head back to our terminal. So let me clear that out. Okay, so if you remember the presentation a few minutes ago, so for you to be able to add components on your Amplify application, so you just simply type in Amplify add and the name of the capability. So in this case, we'll be adding API. Okay, so if you remember, so if you're using Amplify and when you added an API, so we'll be presented with two options. You can create an API using a GraphQL or using REST. So in this case, we'll be using GraphQL. It will ask you about the API name, so I'll just keep it by default, which is my to-do list. And then you have to provide the default authorization for your API. So this is actually necessary for your React application to be able to communicate to the backend. So for simplicity, so we will just be using an API key. If ever you want to make sure that all users will be authenticated prior to accessing the API, we can select Amazon Cognito user pool. So this pretty much states that all of the users that are registered on your application will be provisioned on Amazon Cognito. And once they log in, so that's the time that we will be able to make API calls to your backend. You can also choose OpenID Connect if ever you want to use your own OpenID implementation or any social media authentication, such as Google or Facebook Protect. So in this case, we'll just be using API key. The description of the API key, so I'll just type in Amplify demo. How many days from now on the API key should expire? Let's keep it at 7, 1 week. And I want to configure the advanced settings, so no, I'm done. And then it will ask you if you have annotated a GraphQL schema. So let's say, for example, if you have a GraphQL schema that was written beforehand, so you have to say yes here. But since we don't have a GraphQL schema yet, so we'll be answering no here. Okay. It will then ask you what will be the schema template. So it could be a single object with fields. So basically a one table with fields, or a schema template that will be a one-to-many relationship. So in this case, since we're building simply building a to-do app, so I don't see the need that we're going to have multiple tables here. So I just select a single object with fields. Okay, so that's done. So it will prompt you if you want to edit the schema now. So I'll just show you, I'll just answer yes here so that you can see the contents of the GraphQL schema. Okay, so it should open a file called schema.graphql. So as you can see, it will create the SDL schema. So for the to-do table. So if you have used ORMs before, you should be very familiar to this. So we have the to-do model, and this has 3 fields. So an ID, a unique ID per entry, a name, and a description. So the name and description will be both strings. And the exclamation point here pretty much states that this field is mandatory. Okay. So if you're happy with your schema, in this case for the to-do app, I think a name and a description fields would suffice. So all you have to do is just to tell Amplify to apply the new capability. So in order for you to do that, let's just go head back to terminal and type in Amplify push. Okay, so basically Amplify push will show you a summary of the changes that will be applied on your backend. Okay. And then it will also prompt you if you want to generate code for your newly created GraphQL API. So in this case, we'll be answering yes. And it will ask you what code generation language to target. So since we're using React, so we'll be using JavaScript. And the file name pattern for GraphQL queries, mutations, and subscriptions, we'll just keep it by default. Okay, just by default, set the default over here. And then we let Amplify push do its job. So behind the scenes, it already generated the necessary CloudFormation templates, which are infrastructure as a code that will be used to provision the necessary AWS services for us to build the API. So in this case, it will provision an AWS AppSync endpoint and a DynamoDB table. So this might take a while, so I'll just skip the video until it finishes. Okay, so now the API is live and we can start interacting with it. So if you want to check the status of your backend components, so you can also type in Amplify status. Okay, so as you can see here, we have the API capability live and the resource name is my to-do list. Another option to check the Amplify status is to go to the Amplify console. So let's check it out. So let's go to Amplify. And as you can see, we already have an Amplify application called My To-Do List here. And the deployment status was completed just a few minutes ago. And we have the API capability added. Okay. All right. So the next thing that I would show you is that some of the GraphQL mutations that AWS Amplify code generated for you. So if we go back to the root project folder and look at the source folder, when we did the Amplify push, you will notice that there's a new folder inside the SRC folder called GraphQL. So if we go inside that, it will contain the automatically generated mutations, queries, and subscription based on your GraphQL schema. So if you check it out, so let's open mutations.js. And the mutations.js has the necessary functions that will be needed to be able to communicate to GraphQL. So this actually specifically some queries that would require some updates to the data. So if ever you want to create a to-do or update or delete, they will be inside mutations.js. If ever you want to query the to-do, so they will be stored on queries.js. So let's open that up, code queries.js. And as you can see, we have the following functions, get to do, list to dos to get all of the list. And if you want to get a specific to do, so you can just use the get to do function. Okay, so as you can see, you don't need to write this by hand. AWS Amplify automatically generates the necessary queries for GraphQL for you. Okay, so the next step would be is that we will connect our front end to the API. Okay, so let's head over to our SRC folder, and we will edit the app.js. Okay. So for the time being, so we will be copying, pasting in code to save up some time. So I'll just be deleting the contents of this one and copying a piece of code here. And I'll explain some of the key functions that integrates React with Amplify. Okay, so on app.js, so you'll see that we have this following imports. So we just imported the Amplify library and the API and GraphQL operation. So these are the necessary packages that we'll be using to be able to communicate to our GraphQL endpoint. The mutations and the queries.js will also be imported to app.js because we'll be creating a page that will allow the user to create a to-do and see the list of to-dos. So as you can see, all of the read-only operations will be stored on queries. All of the queries that will require some changes in the data will be stored on the mutations. Okay. We also imported use effect. So if you're familiar with the app.js hooks, so as you can see here, we have a piece of code here from line 16 to line 18, which pretty much executes whenever the React component will be loaded. So in this case, once the React component loads, it will run the fetch to-dos function, which is this. And in this function, this is about the time that we're going to query our GraphQL endpoint and provide them the query for us to be able to list all of the to-dos. Okay. And once we collect all of the to-dos, so we will update the state and trigger the set to-dos by providing the new items, the list of to-dos. Okay. We also have another async function here called add to-do. So this will be triggered by a button. So if ever we need to submit a new to-do, so it will do an API call to our GraphQL endpoint, and we will use the create to-do GraphQL query, and we provide the input that will be collected from the form. Okay. And right down here, which is basically our markup. So we do have a very simple form here that collects the name, the input, and we have a button here that will trigger the add to do function on click, and some styling over here. Okay. So if everything's fine and dandy, so all we have to do is just save it and let's test it out. So let's head back to the terminal. Just let me clear my screen. And let's do an npm start. See if everything works well. All right, so we have our development server back up. So let's see if everything works here. Okay, so if everything works, so we should be able to see a very simple web form here. And let's just test it out. But before trying it out, let's turn on the web developer console. So let's see what happens over the network. Let's just reload. Okay, so let's just type in okay, and let's just click create to do, which trigger the add to do function. All right, so as you can see here on the network tab on the developer view, we should be able to see that our React application was communicating to our GraphQL endpoint. So it is this one. And on the request tab, you should be able to see the GraphQL query. So the GraphQL query pretty much triggers the mutation for create to do. Okay, so if you want if you want to see whether if we manage to store this to do in a persistent manner, so we can go to Amplify Console. So let's just refresh it a little bit to update the backend environments. So as you can see here, we have the categories added API. So let's check this out. And the data sources here is basically the to-do table. So there's a link to the DynamoDB console over here. So just click this. And then we should be able to see that the DynamoDB table that was created by Amplify automatically. So if we head over to items here, so we finally managed to store the to-do on a DynamoDB database. All right, so the next step for us for our web application is to add some kind of an authentication system here. So just like what we did with API, so we will do an Amplify add auth. Okay, so let's head over back to our terminal and do that. So we will add the authentication feature by issuing a command amplify add auth. Okay, so it will ask you some set of questions. So in this case, we'll just use the default configuration. And then it will ask you, how do you want your users to be able to sign in? Okay, so in this case, I'll just use username. And then answer that I don't want to configure the advanced settings. So I just answer no, I am done. All right, so for us to be able to push the changes to AWS, so we just have to do an amplify push. And let Amplify provision Amazon Cognito for us. So Amazon Cognito will be the one who's going to store all of your user credentials. Okay, so this might take a while, so let's just skip over once it's done. Okay, so we finally have the authentication capability configured for Amplify. So let's first check out the Amplify console to see whether if everything is working fine. So if we head over to my to-do list, and you should be able to see that there are now two categories that's been added. First, the API that we added previously, and the authentication. So if you click over authentication, you'll be able to see that Amplify provisioned Cognito, which will be the one that you can use to manage your users and groups. So if we click this link, it will open the dashboard to Amazon Cognito. And this is the user pool, which will contain your users and groups. So since we just provisioned Cognito for our authentication mechanism, so there's no users yet. So let's head over back to our code and integrate auth on our React application. So now that we have our authentication service deployed in AWS, it's now time to add the authentication to our app. So basically, creating the login flow can be quite difficult and time-consuming to get it right. So one of the key advantages if you use the Amplify framework is that it already has an authentication UI component. So that you can use to provide the entire authentication flow for us. So all we have to do is head back to our terminal and edit app.js. All right, so we'll just have to make some few changes over here. So we'll be adding a new import. So import with authenticator from AWS Amplify /UI React. So this came from the Amplify React UI components library. And then we just have to update our export to this. So let's comment it out. So replace it with export default with authenticator and save. Okay. So now we have integrated the UI components necessary for authentication. Okay. So test this out. So let's just head back to terminal and run npm start to start the development server. Okay, so we have the development server up. Let's head over to the page. All right. So as you can see, when you open the React application, so you won't be able to see the to-do app anymore because you're not registered yet. So in this case, you'll be seeing a default login form on a sign-in page. So this is something that Amplify React UI component already provides for you. So in this case, let's head first and create an account. Okay. So let me register. And I'll just use my personal email address. Okay, and let's head over and create our account. So behind the scenes, our application communicated to Cognito. And if we head over to the Cognito dashboard, you should be able to see that there should be a new user here that is currently unconfirmed. So for the user to confirm, I have to provide the confirmation code. So this is actually a typical way of registration. So let's head over to my personal email and see if I've received the confirmation code. Okay, so I have my confirmation code over here. It's 335687. And I am now registered and authenticated. Okay, so I was able to see the last to-do that was created previously. And if we head over back to Amazon Cognito and refresh, you should be able to see that this user is now confirmed and the email has been verified. There's also a number of functionalities that you can do on Cognito. So you can disable the user and you can also reset the password. If ever you want to enable SMS MFA, Cognito can also do that for you. So no need to implement this by yourselves anymore. So let's try it out. So create to do. So we have two to-dos now here. So if we head over to DynamoDB, there should be two new entries here. So everything worked fine. Okay. All right. So we're heading over to the last part. So we're still running our React application on our local PC. So it's time for us to publish this and make it online for everyone to use. So the Amplify component for that would be hosting. So we will head over to the terminal and configure our hosting. Okay. Just clear my screen and we will type in Amplify add hosting. All right, so when you type in Amplify add hosting, so it will ask you what will be the plugin module to execute. So there's actually two ways. You can have Amplify Console to host the React application for you, or you can use Amazon CloudFront and S3 for static site, for setting up a static website. The main advantage of using the Amplify console is that Amplify console automatically builds the CI/CD workflow for you. So in this case, I will just select this one. All right, and it will then ask you about whether do you want to have Git-based deployments or a manual deployment. So in this case, I'll just use manual deployment for now because I don't have this on my own Git repository. All right, so it now tells me that I'm now ready to publish my Amplify project. So all you have to do is just type in Amplify publish. So what Amplify Publish does is that it's going to run Amplify Push in the background, compile your React application in a more optimized manner, and then upload this to Amplify Hosting. Upload this for Amplify Hosting so that it can be accessed publicly. Okay. So as you can see here, we have three capabilities now. We have hosting, API, and auth that we have provisioned previously. So since we're happy about here, so let's just answer yes and let Amplify do its job. Okay, so this might take a while again, so let's just skip over until this finishes. Okay, so finally, the Amplify Publish has finished, and we are now presented with a link to our public site. So let's check it out. Okay, so here, as you can see on the domain, the subdomain starts with dev, which is the environment name that we have configured previously. And as you can see, it uses the amplifyapp.com domain. So, but there's nothing stopping you from assigning your custom domain here. So, and let's try to see if everything works. So, and let's see if everything persists on our database. So there should be 3 entries now. All right, so everything works. So as you can see, one of the key takeaways with this demo is that we barely used the AWS console, besides from confirming whether everything works or looking at the status of our Amplify application. So a lot of things has been abstracted for you using AWS Amplify. So that's about it for this demo. So let's head over back to my slides. All right, thanks for that. Okay, so let's move on to what's next for you. Okay, so, oh, wait, about that. Okay, so if you weren't able to follow the demo, so you can actually run through the tutorial by yourself. So the link is in there. So all you have to do is probably just Google Amplify getting started. So as you can see, in a matter of 30 to 40 minutes, you should be able to build a full stack web application with running publicly. And also, one of the best ways also for me to be able to understand something new is actually to learn by example. Okay, so AWS actually has their own GitHub organization called AWS Samples. So all you have to do is just go there and search for Amplify examples. And then this is actually since first time ko pala mag-present sa PWA PH. So I would really appreciate if you can spend a minute of your time to provide us an anonymous feedback. So this is completely anonymous. You can either scan the QR code on the left or visit the link below. And actually, one of the more important things that I really need to know to the people who actually attended this is actually to know what kind of topics would you want AWS to talk about. Okay, we actually pretty much even open to share everything that is not even AWS specific. I recently talked to the Ministry of Testing group to talk about how to automate tests using Python. So feel free if you want to know Anything else, just feel free to just to mention that in the survey. And since this has been a pretty short and high-level introduction to Amplify, so if you feel that there's a need for us to conduct hands-on workshop, please let us know on the feedback form. All right, so thank you very much. So that's pretty much it for me. So I'm sorry about the spillover. So I was supposed to finish at 8, but I guess I could probably stop my deck right now and focus back on Andresito and Michael to see whether if you have any questions with regards to the talk today.
Okay, so thank you, Sir Alvin. Yeah, if you have questions, leave them at the comment section. But we do have some questions from our team that we compiled. So first is this a major question since people tend to decide which service they would want. So what's AWS Amplify's major benefit over other choices like Firebase or MongoDB Stitch?
Okay, so first of all, I only heard about Firebase, and I do have I do aware that the similarities between Amplify and Firebase, but I'm not in the place to mention whether which is better, right? But in terms of
Yes.
in terms of your use case, right? Definitely. So if you're planning to host your system on AWS, then definitely AWS Amplify is the good to go. But if ever you want to use GCP for that, then probably you might fall back to Firebase. But if you look at it, they do both things very similar way. It's pretty much to abstract the back end for you.
So would you recommend Amplify to enterprises or talagang sa mas siya, parang startups and stuff?
Yeah, so actually kadalasan nakikita kong use case sa Amplify is basically MVPs, right? So for startups, once you have an idea and you have to quickly create a prototype and actually not just prototype, launch it and see whether what is the user feedback would be. Definitely Amplify fits that bill kasi it reduces the dependency to having a full-blown operations team. We actually even have enterprise users to use Amplify. So if you do a quick Google about on AWS Amplify customers, you can see that there's even public use cases wherein startups and enterprise customers use Amplify because enterprise customers as well wants to experiment stuff then, or if ever they want to build a simple web application, then definitely Amplify fits that bill. But then again, just like I mentioned, diba? So Amplify, again, it's an opinionated framework. So meaning it will try to do stuff depending on how it's designed. So if you want to bend it by your will on how it provisions the back end. So there's still some level of customization that you can do, pero you just have to follow how Amplify does it kasi it does it automatically. If you want to have a very flexible way of provisioning your backend and have an operations team that can manage that for you, then might as well to just use maybe a native app and just stitch it manually.
I see. So I've seen na parang somehow it uses CF template, CF in there. Is it possible kaya na to like open source yung template and like, oh, this is my recipe. Pwede kaya yun?
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. So kung familiar kayo sa CloudFormation, di ba? So CloudFormation is like the first infrastructure as a code system, di ba? So it's actually before pa nga JSON yun eh. Nakakahilo basahin eh. Buti lang may YAML na. So what pretty much Amplify does is that kasi kung mag-try kang magsulat ng CloudFormation template, sobrang hirap niya. Okay lang siya kung simple lang yung backend mo eh. But if you're going to have multiple services and you have to stitch them together, it's really you'll actually get tired on writing that stuff. So that's why Amplify does that. Diba? So sa Amplify, sabihin mo lang kung ano yung kailangan mo, tapos siya yung mag-create ng CloudFormation template. So CFN template generator siya per se. So if we're talking about recipes, so yeah, ano to, open source naman yung Amplify so makikita mo kung paano nyo generate yung CloudFormation. And then probably I think it's also worth to mention since we're talking about CloudFormation here, di ba? So before kasi when you write infrastructure as a code, you either write it in JSON or YAML. Again, it's very tedious. Amplify makes it easy to for at some point in time, but there's actually another open source tool that we have launched called AWS CDK. It's called the Cloud Development Kit. I taught some partners on how to use that. But the main advantage for CDK is that you can actually write your whole infrastructure using your favorite language. So you can use Python, you can use JavaScript, you can use .NET, and I think available na ata yung Go. So it actually makes it really easy for you to write. Instead of you writing CloudFormation templates, diba? So sa isang ginawa ko, nag-create ako ng isang three-tier web application using CDK sa Python. It's only composed of 30 lines of code sa Python. Pero pag once na generate mo yung CloudFormation template using that, 700 lines of code. So isa one of my favorite stuff that came out from AWS lately. So if you guys wants to learn more about it, but it's not probably related much on the front end side, but if you're really interested on making provisioning backend easier for you, then please feedback that on the forum. Then I can run a CDK workshop for everyone.
Okay, so we do have one question from our viewer. No, this is from Pojong Martinez. So does Amplify support performance load testing?
Yeah, so good question, Pojong. No? So performance load testing is not included. Usually, yung performance load testing is done on a separate manner. Diba? So if you want to run performance load testing, you can use multiple stuff. I personally use Apache Bench kung simpleng simpleng HTTP calls lang. You can use Locust, favorite ko sa Python. Meron ding mga if you want to bombard your website, diba, to see ano ba yung baseline performance niya kung kailan siya bibigay. Pwede ko rin gumamit ng Locust Swarm. So ilagay mo sa EC2 or maybe sa Docker container, launch it on ECS, then bombard your server too. So going back to the question, so yeah, it's not included, but don't worry, there's a lot of tools for you to use that. Actually, isang peg ko lang din, I just recently talked to Ministry of Testing. I talked a little bit about performance testing. So if you're interested, so you can actually search for Ministry of Testing Philippines and see a short one of my talks about how to do performance testing there. So there's a demo on how to use Locust, and there's also a corresponding GitHub link there to show you some samples. So yeah. But in terms of load testing, huwag kayong mag-alala dyan kasi basically totally serverless yung ginagawa ni Amplify. So it actually auto-scales auto-scales depends on the demand. So I'm not sure when are you going to reach the certain point. I think ang magiging limitation mo na lang dyan yung cost Kasi mag-auto-scale yan hanggang sa kaya ng AWS din. Baka dumating sa point na masyado mahal yung cost, diba? So you just have to set some kind of a baseline there.
No, Michael, dapat promote natin sa government yung pag-auto-scale.
Oh, syempre. Oo. Ayan.
Okay, so another question is, so how does pricing work? Does it have a free tier? So people can try it out.
Yep. Actually, I don't know how okay lang ba i-share ko sa dali screen ko para makita? And sakto-sakto naka-open na sa akin Wait lang Share ko lang yung screen ko. Oops. Ay, naka-share pa pala yung screen ko. So, can you guys see my screen? Okay, here. So,
yes.
Ayan. So, basically, si Amplify, so you can actually play around it. So, we offer free tier. So first of all, whenever you do a deployment, diba? So that requires some compute as well for us to build the assets and all that. So kung sa free tier, meron kang libreng 1,000 build minutes per month. We won't charge you for it. Mm-hmm. And then for hosting, yung first 5 gigabytes stored mo per month is free. And then 15 gigabytes served per month, meaning yung total upload. Kasi di ba every time na may visit sa website mo, meron data that uploads to the customer, di ba? So, and syempre yung upload, hindi yung libre. So, but yung first 15 gigabytes mo, libre. So, kung if you guys want to create your own, say for example, portfolio website, di ba? So, I highly suggest use Amplify for that kasi yung free tier pa lang for personal use, wala ka nang halos mabayaran eh. But if ever, if you're go to beyond that, you'll see the price, the actual pricing, yung pay as you go. So it's actually very, it's very cost efficient kasi it's pay per use. So kung beyond 1,000 bills per month ka na, so it's going to be $0.01 or magkano ba ito in pesos? 4 pesos, 5 pesos per minute for every build or for every deploy. Tapos yung 0.023 per gigabyte stored per month and then 0.15 per gigabyte served. So it's still actually quite cost efficient. And as you can see, yung public SSL certificate are included at no extra cost. So you don't need to buy very signed SSL. So provided na ni AWS yung SSLs for you kung dinideploy mo sa Amplify hosting. Okay?
Pwede pala akong ng vlog dyan. Gumawa ng vlog.
So and yun nga, 'di ba, usually may mga front-end developers kung nag-apply kayo, 'di ba? So sa resume dapat meron kang portfolio page. So yeah, personally kung mag-apply ako ng trabaho, gagawin ko 'to. Sa Amplify ko host yung website ko, then I can publish na, oh, by the way, if you're hiring me, I know Amplify, 'di ba? So that's one thing you can have some advantage.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have any other questions?
We have one last question na stored. So is it possible to deploy my PHP server-side heavy web application in Amplify? Or iba na siguro to?
Iba na eh. So as you can see, Amplify kasi is completely serverless. So it requires you to create, di ba kasi sa PHP kasi usually, ang tawag ito, MVC type of a template yan eh. So dapat may backend component ka running on a server, then yung front end mo. Pwede naman din loosely coupled, possible naman din yun, yung PHP mo API. Possible naman din yun. But if you're talking on the context of Amplify, it's a completely different solution. So, let's say for example, kung ang website mo or the technology stack that you prepare is still LAMP stack, then you have multiple options to do that. You can actually simply use EC2, host it there. Pero kung gusto mo talaga na totally ma-abstract pa sa iyo yung management ng server, so I highly suggest to take a look at Elastic Beanstalk. So Elastic Beanstalk, rin yun. Meron doon, select mo na, ano ba i-deploy mo? LAMP application? Yes, click mo lang yun. Tapos yan yung baka na mag-provision ng mga services sa'yo. So kailangan lang ibigay sa kanya yung code na i-deploy mo. So yun, rin yun, mami-minimize din yung operational overhead mo. So Elastic Beanstalk is one of the easiest ways of doing it, but nothing stopping you to use EC2 kung gusto mo talaga na may total access talaga or total flexibility on managing your server. Now, for Amplify, it's something, if you're looking at building a modern web application that is completely serverless, you can use Amplify. But again, if you have a backend, say for example, di ba, may front-end ka, you can host your total front-end on Amplify. There's nothing stopping you to have your Amplify application to communicate to your PHP application running on EC2. Pwede yun. So, sa demo ko lang kasi kanina, GraphQL ginamit ko eh. Tapos, which actually fronts are DynamoDB. Pero as you can see, you can create, di ba, dun sa may add API, mayroong option dun na REST. Di ba? So, if you add the REST, then you can choose whether communicate through API gateway or through an API hosted somewhere else, maybe on EC2 or an external API. So pwede rin yun.
So parang pwedeng meron kang Lambda function na nasa API gateway to use it, no? Instead of
Yes.
Yeah.
So actually kung gagawa ka ng ng backend, 'di ba? So kung 'di ba kunyari ang Amplify kailangan ng backend component, may backend processing ka. I highly suggest sa Lambda mo na lang gawin. Para wala ka nang i-manage na servers pa, di ba? Then yung Lambda rin is pay per use, meaning Kung low traffic naman yung website mo, then actually yung first million na Lambda function calls walang bayad eh. So we even have customers that actually use Lambda functions. Probably you might have heard about yung sikat na na AWS certification training website, yung Ekal Guru. They completely run on Lambda, and they were told that yung first 6 months actually very minimal yung cost nila kasi yung backend components nila were running on Lambda. So especially if you're a startup, di ba? So wala pa tayo masyadong funds, di ba? So we have to prove a point that that our product is good and eventually gain some investments. Then definitely we want to make sure that the cloud technology provides you a way to quickly start with with minimal capital. 'Di ba? Kasi ang problema kasi sa on-premise, kailangan mo bumili ng server, set it up yourself, pakolok mo, bayaran mo yung kuryente and all that. So kaya that's why there's a lot of startups built on AWS. And then actually that's one of the main reasons why we introduce services like this, kasi we're pretty much aware that there's a lot of developers building stuff on AWS. So that's why we build services such as Amplify. We open source stuff like AWS CDK. So more and more you'll see more services that are catered for developers. And that's actually my main goal, is to give the mind share for everyone. And hopefully everyone would leverage on this on your startups and even companies.
Okay. Michael, do you have any question?
Ako, good. Talagang marami akong natutunan dito sa AWS. Siguro ang last question ko na lang is, para matuto pa ako nitong technology na to, may mga resources ba ang AWS or kahit mga free resource or tutorials?
Yep. So kung download niyo yung deck ko, so on the last few slides, so there's a link there. So or just a quick Google away. Just type Amplify Getting Started. So actually yung demo ko kanina is actually pretty much as follows on Getting Started. So if you weren't able to follow, or maybe I was too very very fast there, so please might as well just follow the Getting Started. It will only take 20 to 30 minutes of your time, and then pag once okay ka na, then destroy mo. Isang button click lang yan, tapos patay na yung server mo para hindi ka ma-charge. So and also don't worry, there's a free tier. So just make sure na na you're within the boundaries of your free tier para hindi ka ma-charge. If you want to create your own AWS account and you don't have a credit card in hand, you can use Paymaya. So my personal account in AWS, I use Paymaya for that. I can also even use GCash. So mag-load kayo ng 50 pesos at least. Kasi pag once na mag-create ka ng AWS account, mag-test bill yung AWS to make sure that yung credit card na binigay mo is totoong credit card. So just before creating an account, just load up at least 50 pesos, then you're good to go.
Okay. Any questions pa, Michael? Okay.
Good. All good na ako. Talagang maganda itong technology na to. Siguro, kakaano pa lang itong technology na to, no? Parang kakabuild pa lang na AWS. No? Recently na
Amplify.
I think it's been a while eh. So 2018 eh. Pero they're very actively developed. Padagdag ng capabilities. So and actually one of the most active projects in GitHub right now. So probably the things that I've shared to you might be outdated na, baka may bagong capabilities pa. So yun. So anyways, I think we're way beyond our time. So again, thank you everyone for giving me an airtime here. Again, I'm very excited to share. Yep, thanks. And I'm very excited to share anything else that you think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have anything that you want to learn,
questions.
Like
Sorry? How can people reach you?
Oh yeah, so on the deck that I shared, I have an email there. So adelago@amazon.com. So I'll try to answer as much as I can. There's a lot of things that happening, but I do have some people that I met on these kinds of talks. Then if I have some time, I try to support them as well. So And I'm looking forward for future talks as well. So definitely this is the first time. So we're trying to be more visible to the developer community. Lately, you might have noticed, right? So if you have anything that you want to learn, feel free to reach out to me. Okay.
Okay, so if you want to
Okay, so
download
once again, thank you, Sir Alvin, and
i-ano natin yung imbitahin natin guys,
Mm.
if you want to check out yung diniscuss, no, ni Sir Alvin, please visit bit.ly/pwaph, no, to download the
Yep.
slides. Tapos
And also the feedback.
and make sure to fill up the form.
then
Yeah,
don't forget
it's completely anonymous.
don't forget that you sign up for the feedback form, no? bit.ly/PWA Pilipinas feedback para malaman natin yung inyong feedback.
Mm-hmm. All right. So again, okay, Maya. So if there's something that you think that I can improve upon, you might have noticed I'm quite a fast speaker. So if you have any suggestions to improve upon our presentation, so feel free to share there. Okay. So again, that's pretty much it for me. Thank you again, PWA Pilipinas, and hope everyone stays safe. And hopefully we can do this in the AWS office next time once the pandemic is over.
Sana no,
Yes.
magkaroon tayo ng meetup sa AWS office ng PWA.
Yeah, soon.
When the time comes.
Yeah, bago nga lang office namin, hindi pa nga namin na papapasukin dahil ng pandemic. But like I heard, we have a very we actually quite have a good events place, so definitely we will get some IT communities to meet and greet there.
Yun. Kaya sana matapos na 'tong pandemya na 'to.
Okay, so Michael,
so once again,
so
thank
you
you
very
Sir
much.
Alvin. Yes. Okay, so yeah, before we end the session, if ever you missed this or you wanted to watch it again, it's available on demand for free on YouTube. Just visit pwpilipinas.org/resource/cloud.talks-AWS, or it's also on our PWA Pilipinas app. Just visit app.pwpilipinas.org. Yeah, and lastly, once again, we're going to invite you to the PH Tech Week 2021. Just visit techweek.phtechcommunity.org to reserve your slot. We have lots of events coming on that week. So, yeah. So once again, I'm Adicito de Guzman, and
My name is Michael Lance. And
see you next time.
Yeah.
Ayun.
See you next
This is
time.
PWA Pilipinas, signing off. Okay.
Yeah.
Sige, bye.
Signing off.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Everyone stay safe.